Hello there, studio teacher friends. Christina Whitlock here, your host and anytime piano teacher friend, here to help you navigate the wild waters of our chosen profession. I am so happy you are here, and the big question of the day is this: how do you know when it's time to part ways with a student? That's a pretty big one, isn't it? Well, that's what we're talking about today in episode 124 of the Beyond Measure podcast. Oh boy. All right. Let's talk about breaking up with a student, shall we? Well, for starters, I just have to say this. Do you know how I title every episode of this podcast like cheers to whatever? Well, in general, I like that. I mean, it's my little shtick, right? But there are also times where that pattern makes titling an episode feel like totally impossible. And that is definitely the case with today's topic. Like, it feels so wrong to say, cheers to dismissing our students. Like, I might as well be saying, cheers to kicking students out of your studio. That just doesn't really feel right, does it? Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but I thought I would give you a little peek behind the curtain over here. So I settled on cheers to knowing when to say goodbye, which is probably about as good as it's going to get. Moving on. Here's the premise I need to establish. I need us all to realize that the balance between what we expect and what we get from our students is kind of always going to be in flux. I mean, if you are in a situation where you need all the students you can get, your criteria is going to be a lot different than those who are selective and only want to work with a certain type of student. And as your studio fills up, your criteria will likely begin to evolve. For that reason, it's impossible for me to hand you a definitive checklist for when your students need to be asked to leave your studio. You know how when you're in a dating relationship, it's really common to talk about deal breakers, like those non-negotiable terms that we are not willing to deal with in a relationship? Well, studio relationships are no different in that regard. We are all going to have our own sets of studio deal breakers. And today, I'm sharing with you mine. I also need to point out the fact that our own perspectives on this topic are often shaped by our closest colleagues in this profession. So if your mentors or your teacher friends are quick to dismiss students over specific behaviors, their ideas are likely influencing yours, and vice versa. Likewise, if you are involved in online teacher groups, or if you follow teachers on social media accounts, you have to understand that that content that you are consuming carries with it an untold amount of influence. It's one of the reasons that I'm so careful with the content of this podcast. I always want it to be a source of encouragement and acceptance for teachers because I am not interested in contributing to the opposite in our profession. So here's what I mean. Let's say, completely non-related to the topic of today, let's say you are involved in multiple conversations with other teachers about, like, shoes. Okay, let's say you have 3 or 4 separate conversations with teachers, online or in person, regarding how they insist that students take their shoes off when they enter the studio. Well, if that's the case, you are very likely to feel like you, too, must require students to take off their shoes when they enter the studio. I mean, according to your perspective, everyone else is doing that too, right? Well, not quite, because there are also a lot of teachers who do not want to deal with stinky feet or other problems that come with taking shoes off, so therefore they require their shoes to stay on. Now, I'm not here to argue that one way or another with you. You can make up your own mind on that. But I'm just here to remind you that there are good arguments on both sides of that issue. And that means that you have to decide what works for you. Not what works for your colleagues, but what works for you. Assuming that any aspect of your teaching has to look the same way as other teachers is just generally not rationale that I am going to support. I've been there, done that with lots of different things. You know, things like, oh, a real piano teacher requires a student to have this kind of instrument and does not deal with anything less. Or a real piano teacher enforces a policy that looks like this, and they would never put up with that. Well, the truth is, there are, of course, lots of reasons why it's good for students to have specific types of instruments to learn on. And there are lots of policies that benefit teachers and their students and are worth having. So, yeah, it's important that we consider those perspectives. But at the end of the day, we have to decide what works for us. Because someone is out there who will teach the kids with less expensive instruments. And the policies that work for other people are not always going to be a good fit for us. So, what on earth does all of that have to do with dismissing students? Well, I think it's easy for us to get up in arms quickly over issues that we've heard other teachers complaining about. I talked a lot about this way back in episode number 34, which is Cheers to Online Engagement. And I happen to think that's an episode that is worthy of a re-listen. So I will link that in the show notes for this episode. But when it comes to questioning whether or not that you want to teach a student anymore, it's important to decide what you want to do. Not what you think others would tell you to do, or what you think the industry standard is, whatever that would be, but you need to do what you want to do. Is dismissing a student going to bring you more peace of mind? Are you going to sleep better tonight? Or are you just feeling uninspired or stuck? Like, is there a possible resolution to this concern that could allow you to keep the student? Or do they really need to go? That is your big question. Because if a student is causing you to lose your peace of mind, or if they are interfering with your ability to meet your own needs, and that includes financial needs, then they probably should go. As for me, I have very few actual deal breakers. I know a lot of studio teachers who hold very specific criteria around things like lesson attendance or weekly practice goals, home instruments, technology requirements, event participation, etc. And really, I absolutely understand why they have those boundaries in place. I understand the benefits to the students who have those things, and I agree that they are absolutely the best way to set a piano student up for success. But personally, as it stands right now, I wouldn't choose to end a studio relationship over any of those things exclusively. But that's largely because those obstacles don't feel insurmountable in this season of my teaching. If my primary goal was to build a studio with a particular reputation for high levels of performance, then I would absolutely have to consider those things more carefully. And I've been there, done that, but it didn't feed me the way that my current studio vibe does. My current goal is to provide anyone on my studio roster with the best musical experience that I can give them. And I will foster them in all the best directions I can, and I will talk to parents about the importance of consistency and quality until I'm blue in the face. But at the end of the day, I'm operating under a philosophy that each family is paying me good money to help develop the musical skills of whoever happens to be in front of me at any given moment, regardless of what has happened in their lives that week. So, does that mean that I will basically just put up with anything as long as the tuition keeps getting paid on time? Well, not quite. I tend to talk a lot about teacher magic on this podcast, and every time I say that, I am always picturing like capital T, capital M, teacher magic, like a trademark. Teacher magic, to me, is all of that warm, fuzzy, innovative energy that we bring to our students. It's the stuff that solidifies you as one of their favorite teachers. It's what makes you a presence in their life that they are always going to remember. And it's something that we, as teachers, give freely and with abandon. And as long as my teacher magic is flowing, I will teach a student forever. But if I start to feel that electricity start to short out, that's when my internal alarm bells go off, and I know that we need to assess the situation thoughtfully. I need that spark of teacher magic to be effective in my work. And in my experience, there is one thing that kills off teacher magic pretty much in one fell swoop. Any guesses as to what that is? Well, I don't know about you, but for me, that is feeling disrespected or having my intentions questioned. Notice that I said intentions being questioned, not my methods. I have talked to many teachers over the years who take great offense when parents question their methods. That's not me, because I don't mind educating parents on my philosophies of why I do things the way that I do. But I'm also very confident in the effectiveness of how I teach. But longtime listeners of this podcast will know that I care deeply about developing symbiotic relationships. Like how I need my studio relationships to be deeply rooted in mutual respect. I need to know that families understand that I bring value to their lives, and in turn, I will communicate very clearly the value that they bring to my life. I mean, I really am grateful to have a business that is dependent on families in my community. And I do not mind bringing 110% to my teaching every single week, unless, of course, I get the distinct impression that a family no longer sees value in what I am doing. And at that point, my teacher magic pretty much fizzles down to nothing, and it's clearly time to move on. Fortunately, this is almost never a problem. I mean, in almost 28 years of teaching now, I can still count on one hand the number of instances where I have felt like my teacher magic evaporated into thin air. Many, many years ago now, I had this pair of siblings whose mother had given me a month's notice that her children would not be continuing at the end of the semester. Well, these two children were already less than enthusiastic, and despite having some natural inclinations for music, it was very clear that this was not ever going to be their passion. Well, once Mom gave me that month's notice, which of course I appreciated, those siblings became surprisingly disrespectful. I was trying with all of my might to wrap things up on a high note, but it was apparent that they knew their time was limited and they were mentally done. So I gave them the best lesson I could, and then I politely let the mom know that I did not see any value coming from their remaining weeks in the studio. And that ended that. I had another situation a few years ago where I had a parent become so blatantly disrespectful to me over multiple communications. I mean, I'm talking name calling and the whole 9 yards. I loved that student so much, and it destroyed me to let that relationship go. But it was also clear that my teacher magic was gone once that parent made it obvious that she did not value my place in their lives. These are the times when you have to step back and remember that this is a job. For so many of us, it's also a lifestyle and a calling and so much more. I mean, I totally get that. But there is no amount of money worth sacrificing my self-respect. So that was a relationship I had to walk away from, and I shed a lot of tears over that one. Another form of disrespect that a lot of us deal with from time to time are families who will frequently try to bargain with you or ask for discounts or exceptions, or even just make little quips about how expensive you are. I've learned to call that stuff out as best as I can. Occasionally, parents will try to make light of it, but at the end of the day, if I have to regularly field comments about how much money I'm costing a family, I am going to take the uncomfortable step to address it. It's just not good for my mental health if I have a family on my roster who makes me feel as though they question the value that they're getting for their money. Fortunately, that is not something I have to deal with very much at all. It's just something that I now know that I consider a potential deal breaker. All right, friends, that was a lot of words to basically tell you two things. One, establish your deal breakers, and they need to truly suit you. Sometimes the frequency of online communication makes it easy to start thinking that we're supposed to end a studio relationship when they reach a certain point. You don't have to end a relationship just because you know other teachers who would, okay? Please don't, in fact. Secondly, consider what teacher magic feels like to you and how you know that your spark has gone out. If there is anything within your control that you could flex on, give it a try. But at the end of the day, things like attitudes towards lessons or the financial situations of others, those things are 100% out of your control. So, if you have a student or a family who is costing you any bit of your mental health, it's really important that you move on. It's not easy, but it is necessary. Whew, okay. So, with that, let's grab the nearest glass and have a little collective toast here, shall we? Studio music teacher friends from all over the world, today I am encouraging you to prioritize your own peace of mind when it comes to your work. If you are in studio relationships that make you feel uncomfortable or make you feel undervalued, you really need to explore what there is to be done. Maybe there is a solution that allows you to keep your student. If there is, by all means, please explore that, okay? Otherwise, remember, this is indeed a job. And I don't know a tuition charge out there that is high enough to justify trading your peace of mind for. These are the things we aren't told about when getting into our teaching careers, aren't they? It used to seem so simple, didn't it? Hang in there, my friends. I am raising my glass to you today, recognizing the difficult scenarios we find ourselves in from time to time. Hear, hear. And that's a wrap on episode 124, friends. I hope your week is looking full of teacher magic and all good things. Let's stay quick to explore options other than dismissing students from our studios, yet always staying centered on our own individual missions, shall we? Your peace of mind matters a great deal, my brilliant friend. Onward and upward toward better understanding the boundaries that are going to enhance our lives. Let's talk soon.